This is Joanne. Welcome to our podcast called Following Through, Episode 9. I am here with my co host, Sujun. Sujun, how are you doing?
Hi, Joanne. I'm good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Yeah, so let's talk about our past week. Our podcast for this week is a little bit, a few days behind due to my fatigue after work, but uh,
And me on travel schedule.
That's right. We had a few things going on, but we are doing this. We're committing, and we are doing our episode 9. Let's get into this past week's goal. Sujun, I'm going to have you talk about your goal first.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joanne. So last week I said I would start reading one chapter of this book that I've picked up called History of Rome. The book is actually free on Amazon. The Kindle version is free. Ancient Rome History. Yeah.
Nice.
Since it's free, I picked it up because it's something that I've always wanted to learn more about. I paid little attention in history classes when I was growing up, and now reflecting back, I think that there's a lot to learn from history, and especially I have a special interest in Rome because I think that in today's world, we could liken the United States to Rome, perhaps. It's not like one-to-one
Right.
similarity.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I thought that it would be great to understand what happened in the past, to have extra knowledge on something that I should have learned back in school. I'm catching up a couple decades later.
So, I mean, how far along are you into this book right now?
So I thought I would start with one chapter. I definitely did one chapter, and since I did have some time this week, and I decided to power through, and I'm actually around 50% on
Nice.
in this book. Yeah.
That means it's a good book. I mean, some books you pick up and you're like, you read a few chapters and you kind of like put it down, but if you're able to make it halfway, hey, that's pretty good accomplishment. So I guess my question would be, are you seeing? I mean, I'm sure you're not at the point where you see the downfall of Rome yet,
Right.
or like is it going? I see. Or are you seeing the? I guess what's the opposite of downfall? Like the uprising of like Rome and the similarities of U.S.
So not a lot yet, but one thing that jumped out at me was the strength of their military power.
I see.
Rome was the strongest then, and the United States hands down in today's world. Maybe other countries are catching up. I don't know, but today, as we speak right now, the United States is still the strongest militarily speaking, from what we can tell from the news, right?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of these legends that come from Roman history, Roman stories, was sort of bits and pieces for me. I've watched Gladiator, for example. I've watched some TV shows that talks about history of Rome, Julius Caesar, and all that. But having this book walking me through the timeline and putting all the pieces together was really helpful for me to just form one continuous story. And yes, it was easy to read because, as I mentioned, I am exposed to bits and pieces here and there from a little bit in history classes, very little in history classes back then, but also watching a lot of these movies, right? History movies, historical movies, that is. And so it was actually quite easy to get through, to my surprise.
I see.
The language of this book is also pretty conversational, so it's nice too.
Yeah, I mean, I can think like several movies and TVs that are kind of based on that. Like, yeah, you have like Gladiator, like you were saying. There's like, isn't there one called 300? The Roman soldiers against the Persians. Yeah, that's another that definitely is more of like a caricature of that war. I don't even know if that how true to history that is. And one of my favorites, and again, this is all fictional, so on HBO actually called Rome was like only 2 seasons, but it was like it talks about the fall of Caesar and then the year after that. And then they ran out of budget and only made 2 seasons, but it had a very like Game of Thrones esque like raw component to I guess the show. Again, I'm sure it's very fictionalized, but yeah, so that's my touch on history about Rome through TV.
Yes, definitely, and it helps in cases like that. TV movies definitely do help, right? And during when I was reading the book, yes, the fall of Caesar, which also touched upon, and the book also touched upon the fight between Rome and
Mhm.
Carthaginian, so the ancient Carthage, which is Rome's arch enemy.
Okay.
I yeah, and that actually revealed another quite an interesting character, which is Hannibal Barca, if I pronounce it correctly.
Mhm.
He was the leader of the military of Carthage back then, and actually won 2 out of the 3 wars between Carthage and Rome back then. And that's another. So the reason I brought that up is that's somebody that I wanted to look more into and read more about
Oh,
because of how well he fought the Punic Wars. So he eventually lost to Rome.
I see.
Finally.
I see. That's interesting. So, are you seeing the like what is like have they quite described why their military power was so good? Because I imagine like back then, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe everyone kind of had similar types of weapons and armor and stuff.
Yeah. So what I gleaned from this book is that Romans weren't so good at first. They were actually defeated a couple times, but they are innovative and they're open to learn and assimilate other cultures and other countries' innovation and technology.
I see.
So that's something that I kind of admire.
Yeah.
And honestly, you asked about the parallel with the United States. I think I missed it, but now that you ask a question, this is probably one of them. Because the United States is a pretty open country.
Right.
It's a melting pot of all cultures and all smart people,
Right.
right? And throughout history, we have definitely welcomed a lot of scientists and technologists from other countries to the United States, and they contributed to the advancement of technology. So I think that you asked a question. That is another parallel between Rome and the United States today.
I see. Oh, that's interesting. It. So you're saying they took on a lot of the other countries' cultures and were able to kind of like make it better or like combine things to
Yeah.
like work for them. Interesting. So whether that be
Yes,
technology or military strategies.
and later when they got stronger and stronger, apparently they colonize a place and then they assimilate the culture and technology. They also are inventive too. They invented something called ballista or something like that. You know,
I
that
see.
they can shoot out fireballs faster or longer. Know the detail, but the key point is
Right.
they are very innovative, and they also at the same time take in other. They're not closed off to other cultures' advancement and
I see.
technologies. Yeah, which makes them really strong. And another thing is also the home was legend of the twin brothers of Romulus and Remus,
Mhm.
and Romulus killed Remus. They were brought up by a she-wolf,
Okay.
and that was was interesting too because it's definitely, I mean, it can't be true, but it was very interesting that that is how Romans believed that the country was founded, and because they were colonized, they were under the emperor previously. The Roman people, when they created the country, or the culture, the people, did not want to get ruled by any one person, and that's why they created SPQC. Is it SPQC? Gosh,
What is that?
um, uh,
You're Googling real quick.
SPQR. I know. I am googling. It's Sensus Populus Romanus. So SPQR. There's also a couple movies that I've definitely watched in the past. SPQR is government that the Roman people created because they didn't want to get ruled by any one person. But too bad, Julius Caesar go over ruled them. And,
I see.
Um,
Interesting.
very interesting.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, tell us more next time when you finish, because I'd be curious to see how the fall of Rome. I mean, you know, just as famous as they are about being such a huge country and just taking over, their fall is also, I think, probably one of the more interesting aspects of that whole timeline. And seeing if we're like going along that timeline in the States, like, are we becoming essentially an example of Rome?
Yeah,
in
at the very
America?
least, we want to. Right. And at the very least, we want to learn from what happened before.
Right.
Hopefully, our leaders, the leaders of our country, would learn from what has happened before and get smart about things.
Right. All right, awesome. So your next week's goal would be related?
Yes, since I'm almost halfway through, I think a reasonable goal and a good one would be to finish the book.
Yeah, I mean,
Hopefully
I think at
this
this
time
rate,
I take yes, and hopefully as I'm reading, I should take notes so that I can repeat back to you.
yeah, we look forward to listening to the rest of the book and what your thoughts are on that. Yeah, so my week, last week, I was reading Atomic Habits, the book, and I think I read like 2 or 3 chapters into it, and I was like, okay, I'll try to finish at least a few more, or like at least finish the book. And I hit a point where the book was interesting and talked about a lot about just like the general ideas of how small habits can become big, and all that kind of stuff was really cool. And then it got into a very almost like a not a scientific, but a point where they break down how to actually make changes. And they break down, and I'll just kind of summarize it. They're like, okay, when something happens, there's a cue, you have a craving, that's why you react to it, and there's a response, and then there's a reward after that. And they're saying like, okay, for every single step of this, you want to change it, either like take away the cue or take away the craving by changing something, or change the reward. And they just kind of go on and on and on about this, and it kind of got a little too obvious and boring. It like that. Yeah, once I started reading that, I was like, I mean, it was almost like in hindsight breaking down how a habit forms and like artificially putting in these components. And of course, I think everybody, if you were truly interested in changing behavior, people naturally make these decisions unconsciously or able to make this. And so kind of reading about the whole process was kind of like not teaching me anything. So I kind of stopped reading the book, honestly, and I skimmed through it, and then I just read like a summary version of the rest of the book, and it kind of just goes into that whole idea of like these steps of like do step 1 and do step 2, do this.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I was like, it's alright. I mean, it reminded me of, Benjamin Franklin. I remember reading in middle school, they were like, oh yeah, Benjamin Franklin had a diary with him called Virtues, where he had 13 virtues he liked, and then he was put a dot every time he violated that every day.
Yeah, yeah.
But like that type of process, I feel like it's already jumping the gun of like you've already decided that this is what you want to do and you're already in this
Right.
habit of it. And it's a lot of work to be checking yourself every day for 13 things. So I don't know how he did it. I mean, that's maybe why he's Benjamin Franklin. But I feel like it is better to focus on one habit at a time, make it a habit. Because, especially like say after work, you're tired. You don't want to do like what they call like a type 2 thinking of like putting all this effort into like uh, controlling your habits. That's like effort. So I feel like these habit changes happen in a stepwise form. It's not like you have to monitor it every day, like a scientific approach, and then know if you fail, you have to like hit yourself or something, Like that
Yeah.
just seems very, I guess, not my style. So this book, I appreciate the first few chapters where it does talk about, hey, small habits add up. The idea of compound habits, just like compound interest, is something you want to keep on working on because eventually, when you look back on it, you'll get recognized or like people will be like, oh wow, how did you end up achieving this? And it's like you'll reach that level of like this recognition or whatever you want to achieve. But in the meantime, in the background, it's all these small little changes that you've made. And then really taking on whatever habit that you want as like an identity or changing a system. So like, like I said, I think from last podcast, I was like, yeah, if you're going to quit smoking, instead of saying I'm going to try to quit smoking, rather than trying to make yourself think about, I'm just not a smoker. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that stuff was a little bit more just kind of like refreshing to think about. I don't think it really changed anything, to be honest. It was just kind of like, oh, that's kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. So I think, honestly, maybe those 2 points really just kind of hit home for me. And then after that, I think I got, pretty, got the crux of the book.
Yeah.
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 So,
Sometimes books are what it is, right? It's another person's opinion. It's
right.
another person's it's a method, and you read about it and then you think about it. And me, sometimes want to think about it as a conversation, a private
Mm-hmm.
conversation between me and the author. And it sounds like you kind of did too, but it doesn't really have to uh, be agreeable. It's another
Right.
perspective.
Right.
As long as it makes you think about things, I think you have achieved your goal.
Yeah, it definitely did. And yeah, I appreciate the book. And so I think I'm pretty good with what I've gotten from it. And, just kind of thinking back on some of the habits that I've changed, I think just by looking back on how I've changed some of my habits, I can like kind of apply those. So like about adding a habit, like a good habit like exercising, I think it's I mean that has almost become a reactionary response of like, oh, I feel gross, so I want to exercise so I don't feel gross. But then other
Yeah.
habits of like, oh, I want to stop, I don't know, for instance, like drinking socially that much.
Mhm.
That became more of the foresight of not the immediate response of drinking, of like, getting drunk and being high and having fun, but like the aftermath. And thinking about that had made me easily quit my habits. So like I think your cue and where you focus your cue along that habit, the timeline of that seems to be, at least for me, important to like pick up a habit or throw away a habit. Uh, so yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, it sounds to me like you think about the outcome, think about the future Joanne,
right.
and how the future Joanne would judge the present you. Like the things that the future Joanne will not appreciate, and then it changes your habit today.
Yeah, it's very much a future oriented thought process now. Yeah. And just like kind of realizing like I've done this too many times and I feel bad when I do this, so why do I do it? And you just kind of like remind yourself of like how it felt being bad. So then therefore
Yeah,
let me not do this.
yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah, I think that's a really effective way of doing it. When I do think about it sometimes, about the future me, I do sometimes make the right decision for the present time. But I think that the problem with a lot of people or majority of us humans, mortal humans, is that we cannot really appreciate future self enough.
Right.
And I think that, yeah, just constantly reminding yourself, ask yourself to imagine what happens in the future. If the future you would appreciate what you do, what the decision you make today, more we remind ourselves, the more we ask ourselves, it will be better. And I think I'm almost sure that there has been studies about this, because I know I've read about it, that people cannot relate to our future self really well, even though it's still us, even though we think that we can. Yeah,
I see.
very interesting.
Yeah, no, that is very interesting.
Yeah, and another thing about building a habit and personal development is it's also quite, it's in the title itself, right? It's personal development. I see it as fashion. It might be a trend to wear purple today. It might be a trend to wear, I don't know, sunglasses tomorrow. Or you and I both have suits, for example, right? We have skirts, we have suits, but then the suit that I picked out is different from the set of suits that you picked out. I might be wearing a blue stripe suits. You might go for the classic black suit. So see personal development methods as something like putting together a wardrobe. There's fashion trends, there's things that are staple, there are rules. Like after Labor Day, you should not wear white.
Right.
I will.
That's a good reminder.
Essentially, timely, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's what works for you. And everyone, even if you give two people the same rules to go out to shop clothes, right? They will still come back with different types of clothing items. The way I see personal development is such that you and I have to develop for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And there's like so many books out there that have different methods, like you're saying, like different wardrobes. And it definitely is like just establishing your way that works for you. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, which also makes it hard, right? There's no one size fits all.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, I think my next goal, I don't know if it'll be like anything specific, but I had this conversation with my colleague who's like more into real estate investing. Her dad's into it, and it kind of got me thinking like I should probably start looking into it. I don't have a house, but I've been paying rent for like forever, and I should at some point not keep my money just sitting around. But just in general, I mean, that kind of like started making me think about investing in general, passive income, and all these things. As you already know, I'm already studying about stocks, and that's more because I enjoy it, not so much because I think this is a good investment choice. Honestly, it probably isn't, but it's something that I just enjoy doing. But in terms of like actual like smart money decision making, other than your retirement fund and index funds and all that kind of stuff, I was like, okay, I should probably start looking and reading a little bit more into this world of real estate because I know nothing about it, and my family's mostly all educators, and we're just in the mindset of like kind of like that book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yeah, we're the poor dad where we're like, make money, sit on your money, maybe get pension, and then you'll be good. Whereas the rich dad was
work
like,
hard.
right, work hard and just don't make risks.
Yeah.
So this idea of making money from good debt is weird, but I want to learn a little bit more about it. So I think real estate is like an example of that. So yeah, I kind of want to read a little bit more about it. I mean, I think I picked up a book called ABCs of Investing, and then another one, I forget what it's called. So I think I might skim through it. I've kind of already read a few chapters of it, but next week hopefully I'll have a little bit more of an idea or an organized thought, or maybe even my own goals like kind of laid out for like the next week or two.
That sounds great. I hope to get smart by hearing what you have to say next week also, because that's something that I have always wanted to learn more about.
Yeah.
and just never get to it. And I look forward to that.
Yeah.
And also, you know, Joanne, real estate is almost the oldest business there is.
Right. No, it's true. It's a pretty reliable business if done right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, let's move on to the random question of the day.
A
Yeah.
random question indeed. So Joanne, you have traveled to many places, many countries. What's your favorite?
Probably Iceland. Yeah, I would say Iceland.
Wow.
Yeah, Iceland was just one of those places. I mean, it wasn't that touristy when I went, but it felt like the beginnings of humanity almost, like, because the whole country is like based on like a volcano eruption, so it has such a different ecosystem every like 2-3 hours as you go along the country. Um, yeah, so I did a road trip with my friend about a week, and we did a full ring of the entire country. And it's just you're just like left alone with nature and beauty, and it's so safe, and people are so nice, and just it just reminds you of like just a humble way of living and like being so close to nature. And that country also just does such a good job. I know they were like in a recession and now their industry is like going up from tourism, but their energy is all renewable, so they get energy from like the what do you call it? From like the ground heat, because they have a lot of like thermals. Geothermal. Yes, there. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, they get a lot of energy from that.
Okay,
And
cool.
some other stuff. So it's a beautiful country. I love it. Yeah, I recommend it.
Awesome.
What about you? Yeah.
Yes,
What about you?
Yeah, me. So there are many. I mean, I've traveled quite a bit, but not enough. There are many spots that come close to my number one. For example, Germany, of course, Malaysia,
Right.
and the one that I keep going back and reminisce is Kyoto, Japan.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
For serious reasons, it's beautiful, has a lot of history, and it's just. I went during the fall once and the winter once. It was beautiful. Fall colors was mind-blowingly beautiful, and the winter, during the winter, the Inkakuji, the temple that is made with gold, I believe.
Yes.
It's just beautiful, reflected snow. Like the snow just accentuate the beauty of the temple. So that's what I go to. And you know, to be cheeky, it also is to me, it is like an adult Disneyland. You know, Disney
see.
World, Disneyland, yes. It's the happiest place on earth for kids. Right? You go on the streets, you have everything to see, left, right, top, down, whatever. That's how I felt like when I was in Kyoto.
I see.
So much to see. Yes.
Yeah. It definitely is a beautiful place. I've been there briefly as well. Yeah, I like Kyoto. Actually, I agree. I like Kyoto more than like Tokyo, because Tokyo is just kind of like your typical. I mean, not typical city, but like it's a city. Kyoto,
Yeah.
I thought you got to see a little bit more of the culture, like the historical things about Japan.
Yeah, it's just so pleasing on the eyes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Maybe
So
wanna
yeah,
go back there.
I know. You know, hopefully when traveling starts opening up, which it kind of has already. But
Right.
yeah, let's convene again next week. And yeah, Sujin, I'm gonna let you
Sounds good.
end our segment.
Yeah, sounds good. Looking forward to the next week, and we'll work on our goals and come back to you and reconvene in a week. Bye now.
Bye.